Exposed. My daughter-in-law's words cut deep, but a 30-day transformation revealed my true power. Margaret collapsed onto her favorite armchair, her mind racing after the gathering that had just unraveled. Emily's voice pierced through her thoughts with a sharpness that left her reeling. "You've never been a proper mother." The words echoed in her brain, thrumming like a relentless drum. In front of the entire family, she had felt like a statue, frozen and unworthy, exposed and ridiculed. For decades, she had poured herself into her family, nursing her sons through fever and heartbreak, stitching together their lives as a single mother. Yet, it seemed all those sacrifices counted for nothing as Emily cast a dark shadow over her efforts. That humiliating moment ignited something within Margaret, a flicker of ambition long extinguished, like a wisp of smoke from a fading flame. What if she found a way to embrace who she was, beyond the roles she played? Margaret no longer wanted to be defined merely as a mother or grandmother. The thought tightened her chest. She yearned for something more, something real. She glanced at her dusty easel, a relic from her forgotten love for painting. Could she really pursue her passions now, in her late 50s? The self-doubt threatened to choke her resolve, yet an ember of determination began to spark in the depths of her soul. Dawn broke as she buried her fears beneath the rhythm of her body during morning yoga. Each stretch pulled at the weight she had carried for too long, stitching together the fragments of her identity. With every deep breath, she redefined herself, not just a caregiver, but a woman reclaiming her lost autonomy. Yet, her journey was far from simple. Balancing her duties as a grandmother was another burden. Juggling paint and play dates had her questioning if she could truly manage it. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Margaret dove into her art classes, she reconnected with joy. A brush gently gliding across the canvas softened her spirit. Each stroke blazed with a raw truth, unearthing memories that weren't just about pain, but resilience, triumphs as well. Yet, just as momentum soared, a sudden financial strain hit, tightening the screws on her newfound freedom. It felt like every inch she gained was a slip back into the shadows of obligation. Then, Emily reappeared, her thinly disguised jealousy unraveling the fragile threads of confidence Margaret had been weaving. Each backhanded comment felt like a pinprick, pushing against her resolve. There was a deep yearning to stand up to Emily, to defend the woman she was becoming. But the familiar dance of family pressure loomed, threatening to pull her back into silence. Would she summon the strength to confront her once more, flaunting the transformative power she was discovering? Margaret's heart raced with fear as she prepared for her first art exhibition. All her hard work would hang in the gallery, a celebration of her journey. But could she withstand the inevitable judgment? The weight of expectation felt stifling, not only from the crowd, but most acutely from her family. The tension in the air was thick, an unseen force that left her grappling with conflicting emotions. This wasn't just an exhibition, it was a declaration of her worth. But would that recognition truly bring her freedom? The storm was brewing, and as she faced the crowd, Margaret stood at the crossroads of vulnerability and empowerment, her true battle waiting on the canvas of her soul. The gallery buzzed with excitement, a cacophony of voices that rose and fell like the waves of an indomitable sea. A world of color and light surrounded Margaret, but her heart felt heavy, tethered to the ground. The bright paintings that adorned the walls, each piece a reflection of her struggles and triumphs, seemed vibrantly alive, yet they did nothing to ease the tumult within her. A knot twisted in her stomach as she scanned the room for familiar faces. Most importantly, where was Emily? Margaret's breath hitched as she spotted her daughter-in-law across the room, weaving through the audience with a practiced ease, seemingly at home in this realm she felt so foreign to. The fear of confrontation stirred a primal instinct to retreat, but that instinct was tethered to a past she no longer wished to inhabit. For the first time in her life, Margaret consciously chose to challenge her fears. She closed her eyes, visualizing herself stepping toward the crowd, each footfall steadying her resolve. Her heart echoed the mantra she had whispered during morning yoga. I am enough. As she opened her eyes, clutching her glass of wine, Margaret caught a glimpse of her reflection in a polished mirror hanging on the wall. A woman transformed, poised with an elegance that transcended age. The moment seemed to stretch. With each polite smile she offered to the guests who admired her paintings, a delay pushed back her anticipation of Emily's imminent barb or jeer. Would Emily recognize the power in her work? Or would she find a way to belittle it, as she always had? The memories of past grudges lingered like a distant echo, mocking reminders of family gatherings she'd endured, where her worth had been scrutinized and judged. As the hours rolled on and the audience grew more animated, Margaret braced herself as her confidence wavered. She was proud of each piece displayed, a bubbling crimson sunset, a stormy blue seascape, and an intimate portrait of her son, his laughter captured perfectly mid-guffaw. But would their brilliance be enough to drown out Emily's caustic remarks? Amidst the crowd, a voice emerged, jolting Margaret from her introspection. Your work is magnificent. A kind woman with an encouraging smile gestured to the sunset painting. It speaks of resilience. You can see the depth of your soul within. Margaret's heart swelled, ignited by affirmation. It dawned on her. Perhaps Emily had lost her power over her, not just in words, but in perception. Each compliment felt like a stroke of paint layered upon the canvas of her worth. The evening continued, yet the anxiety within didn't fully dissipate. Instead, it transformed into focus. Each interaction was a testament to growth, brick by brick, constructing a newfound identity. The thin veil of safety among the supportive crowd began to thicken. It sparked hope that sprang forth from deep within. What if this was the moment she mustered the courage to confront Emily? With renewed intent, Margaret noticed Emily again as she approached, cloaked in her usual skepticism. But this time, Margaret stood firm. I would love your thoughts on my favorite piece, she said, gesturing toward her boldest work, a swirling abstract that felt exhilaratingly chaotic. With every word she spoke, the tension coiling in Margaret began to elongate, the fight-or-flight mechanism igniting in her core. In that moment, she recognized an eve of change, one that wouldn't be thwarted by an external naysayer. But there was still uncertainty flickering behind her fierce resolve. What awaited her in this confrontation? Steeling herself, Margaret prepared to face not only Emily, but the judgment that had troubled her for too long. The atmosphere shifted, a palpable sense of impending change settling in the air as she readied herself for the confrontation. The moment had arrived. Margaret steadied her breath, unwilling to let the tempest of her emotions drown her newfound resolve. As Emily approached, the cacophony of the gallery faded into mere background noise, her focus sharpening solely on this encounter. The swirling canvas stood between them, vibrant yet chaotic, a perfect metaphor for the storm brewing within her. Interesting choice, Emily said, her voice a mixture of feigned politeness and expected sarcasm. I didn't realize you were drawn to chaos. The words felt like familiar daggers, meant to pierce her fragile confidence, yet something in Margaret shifted. Chaos is an essential part of life, she replied, her voice steady, as if she were priming the brush with paint rather than combating a verbal attack. It's where growth happens. My art reflects that, and I think it's important to acknowledge our own storms. She kept her gaze unflinching, unaffected by Emily's condescending smile. Emily's expression flickered. For a moment the mask slipped. It's just a lot, Marg. Are you sure you want to put all of this out there? Her words belittled Margaret's artistic expression, yet they carried an undercurrent of concern that registered on Margaret's radar. Was it genuine care beneath the layers of criticism, or merely another attempt to undermine her? "You know," Margaret continued, feeling the momentum shifting beneath her feet, "I never asked for your approval. I used to think it mattered, but I found something much more profound: the confidence to express myself without apologies." Each syllable plunged deeper into the heart of their past, revealing latent wounds yet unhealed. But this time, instead of discomfort, Margaret felt a strange sense of liberation. Emily absorbed this shift no differently than she would a piece of unfamiliar art, tentative and perplexed. "I always thought you needed my validation, especially after, you know." The pause hung heavy, fraught with historical weight and unspoken expectations. Margaret caught herself wanting to respond with buried regrets, but the reflection in the mirror moments ago anchored her. She didn't have to evoke the past any longer. "The truth is, I've spent far too long living in someone else's shadow," Margaret asserted, reclaiming her narrative. Each word emerged like pigment, splattering on canvas, vibrant and unapologetic. "Art helped me emerge from that, helped me reclaim my voice. If you cannot see that, then perhaps it's not the artwork that's the problem." Emily's eyebrow arched, a mix of surprise and irritation playing on her features. "Do you realize how dramatic you sound?" she retorted. With a steadier resolve, Margaret replied, "I'm done being dramatic for your entertainment. I'm a woman with a voice now, and if you're uncomfortable with that, then maybe we need to rethink how we relate to each other." The air between them crackled with tension, each woman wrestling with an uneasy peace established through years of unresolved conflict. Margaret felt a surge of clarity. This was not just about the art, but about dismantling the perpetual cycle of approval she had chased her entire life. Margaret took a breath, feeling the pieces fall into place within her mind. This was the moment she had anticipated, but it was not merely a confrontation with Emily, it was a confrontation with herself. Deep down, she knew that her emotional evolution was not just encapsulated within this gallery's walls, but extended beyond them. In the release of Emily's grasp on her, she could fully embrace her identity as an artist, a creator, and a woman worthy of respect. "Do you remember when we talked about potential?" Emily asked suddenly, the vulnerability in her tone surprising both of them. "You told me everyone deserves to realize theirs." "Yes, I do," Margaret replied, allowing a small smile to form. "Maybe it's time we all embrace our potential, even if it is messy." As the crowd around them ebbed and flowed, a realization struck Margaret like a brushstroke on canvas. Perhaps it was time not just to challenge Emily, but to begin a new chapter in their relationship, one built not on criticism, but maybe understanding. But as that thought took root, a twist punctuated the moment. A stranger approached with a business card in hand, intrigued by Margaret's bold work, unaware of the emotional upheaval that had just unfolded. How would Emily react to that? Margaret felt the tide of possibility rising once again, leaving her eager for what was to follow. She was ready for more than praise, she was ready for validation from herself. But then, a sudden flash of concern crossed Emily's face. Just as Margaret began to wonder what that meant for their future, Emily turned and walked away, leaving Margaret half-stunned, half wondering about the implications of her choice. This was not the end. It was merely the beginning of a deeper exploration. What was next for them, and how would this confrontation redefine not only their relationship, but Margaret's journey moving forward? Margaret accepted the business card with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. The stranger's warm smile seemed to brighten the chaotic gallery around her, a flickering light against the backdrop of emotional turmoil she had just battled. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting Emily to snatch it away, but the woman had already retreated, leaving Margaret to navigate this new, unexpected opportunity on her own. "Your work is compelling," the stranger said, his earnest eyes scanning the swirling colors of her canvas. "I'm curious to know more about your inspiration." His interest sparked something within her, a deep well of creativity that had been dormant for too long. The question transformed into a catalyst, pushing her to articulate what she had only felt. "I wanted to capture the essence of life's chaos," she replied, her voice gaining strength. "It's messy, it's unpredictable, but ultimately, it's where growth occurs." As she spoke, Margaret felt a rush of confidence surge through her veins. This was what she had fought for, an opportunity to express herself unapologetically, free from the confines of judgment and expectation. "I can see that," he nodded encouragingly. "There's raw emotion in your work, something powerful that resonates. Have you thought about showcasing it in a larger venue?" The prospect of a broader audience was thrilling. Moments ago, she had felt shackled by Emily's criticisms, but now the possibility of recognition was breathing new life into her dreams. She had spent years struggling to find her voice, but it seemed that this encounter could alter the trajectory of her career in ways she had yet to comprehend. Margaret paused, considering how quickly the paradigm had shifted. A single moment of bravery had caught the attention of someone within the industry. "Honestly, I've been hesitant," she confessed, the admission rolling off her tongue. "I don't know if I'm ready for that level of vulnerability." The fear crept in like fog, but she pushed it back, reminding herself of the strength she had just unearthed in her conversation with Emily. "Vulnerability is a part of the process," he replied gently, his understanding gaze persistent. "Embrace it. Your work might just unlock others' hidden fears and triumphs, just as you've begun to understand your own." His words hung in the air, resonating deep within her. The sentiment was a revelation, a narrative that entwined itself with her own journey of self-discovery. Maybe vulnerability was the very key she had been missing all along, not only in her art, but in every facet of her life. Suddenly, a flicker of determination ignited within her. What if she channeled her experiences and the chaos that had defined her art into something even richer? She envisioned creating a series that depicted her growth, each piece a testament not only to her artistic evolution, but to her personal journey. The canvas could become a map of her transformation. "I'm ready," Margaret declared, her voice steady. "I want to share my work. I want people to feel the chaos, the vulnerability, and the resolve to rise above it." The stranger's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm, impressed by her shift in demeanor. "That's the spirit. Let's connect and make this happen. I can introduce you to galleries that align with your vision." As they exchanged information, Margaret felt a sense of excitement that eclipsed any residual fears about putting her heart on display. But beneath this exhilaration lay a realization. This pathway was fraught with its own challenges, requiring the very essence of her newfound strength. The conversation faded into the background, and her mind began to wander back to Emily. There was unresolved tension that needed addressing. Would Emily's departure impede her newfound momentum, or was it merely another layer of her transformation? Margaret clenched her jaw, determination hardening within her. The time had come to confront all aspects of her journey, not just the artistic pieces. She owed it to herself, and to the potential that had always lain dormant. This was just the beginning of a broader journey, fraught with uncertainty, vulnerability, and the promise of her own power. As she left the gallery, filled with visions of her future, she recognized there was still a confrontation ahead, one that would test her commitment to her own voice. She couldn't avoid Emily forever. The air between them was thick with the potential for understanding. But would that understanding come at a cost? Or would it fuel both of their artistic fires? The next few days would be paramount, requiring her to not only pursue her dreams, but also revisit the complexities of her relationship. Would she have the strength to bridge the growing chasm between them? Or would it deepen their divide? The decision loomed, heavy with anticipation. Margaret woke the next morning with a blend of exhilaration and dread swirling in her chest. The card from the stranger lay beside her, its crisp edges a reminder of the conversation that had ignited something within. She needed to seize this moment, yet the thought of facing Emily lingered like an unwelcome shadow. In the harsh light of daytime, her ambitions felt both thrilling and intimidating. She retrieved her sketchbook, flipping through the untouched pages until a stray pencil roll brought her back to the moment of realization, that surge of assertiveness that had empowered her just hours ago. In the privacy of her home, Margaret could explore that feeling without fear of judgment. She sketched furiously, bringing forth a raw tapestry of colors and emotions, chaos intermingled with glimmers of hope, as if attempting to visually articulate the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. But the sketches brought her little solace. They illuminated the undercurrents of self-doubt that threatened her newfound confidence. What if her work, which felt so personal, was rejected? What if the vulnerability she had decided to embrace led to further hurt? Margaret took a breath, squeezing her eyes shut, grappling with that intrinsic battle between her aspiration and fear of failure. The thought of Emily struck her again, sharper now. It wasn't just about confrontation, it was about reconciliation. The art world was filled with fierce competition, but the emotional landscape of her relationship with Emily posed its own challenges, twisted and tangled as they were. Confronting it required a resolve she hadn't yet acknowledged. Could she remain true to herself while also attempting to heal the rift? Fighting the urge to retreat back into inconsequential sketches, Margaret tossed the pencil aside and poured herself a cup of coffee. As the steam curled into the air, she thought about the upcoming meeting with the stranger looming ahead. It was time to strategize. She opened her laptop and began researching local galleries, looking for opportunities to showcase her work. Each brand, each platform required careful thought about how her vision aligned with their values. The notes began to form scattered ideas, but eventually coalesced into a clearer vision. Margaret envisioned a series titled The Beauty Within the Chaos. It would invite viewers into her world of transformation, drawing from both her artistic and personal growth. This theme could resonate deeply with potential patrons, giving them a view into her exploration of vulnerability, an idea she had previously feared sharing. As the day faded, she made a decision. It was time to bridge the gap with Emily, to address the tension swirling in her life. Maybe the act of reaching out could clarify not just her relationship with her mother-in-law, but with herself as well. Embracing vulnerability meant taking risks, and engaging with Emily felt like the most significant risk of all. That evening, filled with an unexpected sense of fortitude, she picked up her phone. The digital silence between them sparked apprehension, but she felt compelled to move forward. She texted Emily, suggesting a meeting, hoping for a chance to mix honesty with clarity and seek some understanding. Waiting for a response felt excruciating, the weight of each passing moment amplifying her anxiety. As she paced the room, her mind raced with possibilities. Was this the right move? Did she have the words to convey how deeply the rift had affected her? There was no turning back now. The time for action had come. Just then, the notification chimed. Margaret's heart leaped, and she stopped in her tracks, bracing herself for whatever might follow. Emily had replied. But the singular response on her screen was unsatisfactory, leaving Margaret filled with uncertainty. What did it mean, and how would it alter her path? The taste of confrontation was close, and yet the essence of her journey felt caught in limbo. With the stakes rising, Margaret realized the confrontation she sought, both with Emily and herself, would demand everything she had prepared for. There would be no half measures, no superficial apologies. As she clenched her phone tightly, she contemplated what lay ahead, an emotional reckoning and the challenge to forge forward with her art. Would she find the strength to be true to herself amidst the impending confrontation? Or would the weight of her unresolved feelings fracture her resolve just when it felt strongest? In that stillness, Margaret understood. She was on the verge of something transformative. All she had to do was take the leap. The next morning, Margaret awoke to the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the crisp autumn air that filtered through her half-open window. Despite the anxiety that lurked beneath the surface, she had resolved to confront both Emily and herself that day. There was a sense of clarity now, sharp as the chilling breeze. The uncertainty from the night before had solidified into a tangible need for resolution, guiding her like a subtle compass toward her goals. As she sipped her coffee, Margaret reflected on the message Emily had sent. It was not a rejection, but it lacked warmth, terse and practical. They could meet, but only after Emily's commitments, which felt like an echo of their previous entanglements. Obligations over sentiment. Yet the prospect of seeing Emily ignited a flicker of courage within her. This meeting wouldn't just address their tangled history. It could reframe it, set the stage for her own evolution. Compelled by nurturing that flicker, Margaret returned to her sketchbook, where fresh pages awaited the chaos of her thoughts. She closed her eyes for a moment, envisioning her gallery series. The bold piece titled "The Beauty Within the Chaos" should not only capture her artistic struggles, but also resonate with the complexities of her relationships. She sketched, creating the heart of the series, infusing it with tumultuous colors that danced on the cusp of collaboration and conflict. With each stroke of her pencil, the art began to transcend mere emotion. It evolved into a testament to resilience. Margaret realized that in her journey, both Emily and the chaos of their relationship could play significant roles. This acknowledgement ignited the underlying narrative of her work. It would no longer shy away from vulnerability. It would embrace it. Suddenly, she was struck by another idea, one that stirred her chest with a mix of apprehension and excitement. What if she created pieces that incorporated messages, words of empowerment, direct quotes that spoke to her audience of the struggles she faced not just as an artist, but as a woman navigating complex relationships? Not only could it provide a layer of depth to her series, but it could also become a part of her healing. Inspired and slightly breathless, she grabbed her laptop again. Diving deeper into research, she began collecting quotes that resonated with her and crafting those phrases into her sketches. Each quote layered meaning into her imagery, outlining her struggle and triumph. Her vision crystallized further. She could use her art to bridge the gap she felt with Emily. Hours slipped away as her ideas flowed and mingled harmoniously with her anxieties. But as the sun dipped, revealing twilight's approach, she felt a wave of apprehension. The clock was ticking toward their meeting, and despite her burgeoning determination, she began doubting her resolve. What if confronting Emily meant dismantling the fragile foundation she was trying to build in her art? No turning back. She stood at the precipice of confrontation, both with Emily and the parts of herself that had been shackled by fear. The thought of laying bare her vulnerabilities, her concerns, her desire for connection, sent a shiver down her spine. Yet, wasn't that part of the art she aimed to create? The essence of her fears infused into the canvas could create something breathtaking. As she gathered her things, Margaret took a deep breath, summoning strength from the new artwork that was a culmination of all her emotions. Moments later, as she stepped out into the evening chill, she realized that the impending confrontation would demand the fullest version of herself, a version she had barely begun to touch upon. Would this meeting with Emily become a pivotal moment in her journey, one that would push her to fully embrace her power? The thought echoed persistently as she made her way, hand trembling slightly as she adjusted her grasp on the edge of her sketchbook. This was not just about art, it was about her identity. And just as she reached the cafe where they agreed to meet, she caught sight of Emily walking through the door, looking just as tense. Was this the moment their relationship could pivot toward understanding, or would it unravel further, testing not just their bond, but Margaret's own resolve? Margaret stepped into the cafe, the warm air wrapping around her like a familiar embrace, but it felt misplaced, suffocating in contrast to the chilling uncertainty swirling within her. Taking in Emily's tense posture as she sat at the table, Margaret felt an unexpected pull, an urgency to delve deeper into their shared past. Here, they were seated on the precipice of a conversation laden with unspoken apologies and long overdue confrontations. Emily glanced up, her eyes swirling with emotions that mirrored Margaret's own, a blend of apprehension and cautious hope. What would this conversation unleash? Would it heal them or carve deeper wounds? As Margaret approached, she recognized the flicker of vulnerability in Emily's expression, an acknowledgement of the gravity of their history. It ignited something within Margaret. She settled into her seat, nervous energy buzzing through her limbs, but she clutched her sketchbook tightly, a lifeline grounding her as she prepared for the emotional exchange. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. Emily nodded, but silence thickened the air, an unspoken tension that needed to be pierced. Margaret realized she would have to break the barrier. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she said, her heart racing. Rather than the anticipatory nod she wanted, Emily's expression shifted, shielding her thoughts behind a turbulent mask. "What do you want to discuss?" Emily's tone was guarded, almost defensive, calculated to keep the heaviness at bay. It was a reminder of how far they had drifted apart, speaking not just of their past, but of what they might still salvage. Drawing in a deep breath, Margaret felt the weight of responsibility tethered to her words. "I need to share how I feel about everything. The distance between us, the misunderstandings, the way our struggles eclipsed our connection." Emily's fidgeting fingers betrayed her rising anxiety. It was equal parts frustration and fear, perhaps even regret. Could they navigate this uncharted territory without turning back? Margaret pushed on, emboldened by her artistic insights. This was not just about their relationship, it was about transforming her pain into strength. As if the words sparked a flicker of recognition, Emily leaned forward, tentatively lowering her defenses. "I didn't realize how you felt, Margaret. I thought we were moving on." "Moving on isn't always the same as healing," Margaret replied, her voice imbued with newfound clarity. "I've been working on this series of paintings that captures the duality of chaos and beauty. It's about finding resilience through vulnerability, a message I think we both need to embrace." The weight of their conversation hung between them as Emily's brow furrowed with curiosity. "Can art really bridge our disconnect?" "I believe so," Margaret said, confidence rising with each passing second. "If I can expose my fears and uncertainties on canvas, perhaps we can find a way to express our own struggles with each other. There's such power in vulnerability. Maybe it can help us reframe our relationship." Emily's gaze softened, distracted momentarily by the truth in Margaret's words. The chains of their misunderstandings started to loosen. "What if it doesn't work? What if things just get messier?" Margaret paused, weighing her motherly instincts against the requirements of personal growth. "Emotions can be messy," she finally said, "but they are also essential for clarity. This could be the most important step towards understanding ourselves and each other." The promise of exploration rather than division hung in the air, and Margaret felt a tremor of hope flutter within her, however fragile it was there. The two women had embarked on a journey far beyond the surface level of pain. Their shared struggle could ignite new forms of expression, not just in art, but within their lives. Yet as they spoke and began to peel back layers of their complex history, Margaret sensed the lingering doubts that clouded Emily's heart. Would this truly catalyze their healing? Would she be ready to receive what Margaret had to share? Before the conversation could delve deeper, a commotion at the door dragged their attention away. An unexpected arrival overshadowed their fragile moment. A figure from the past, someone Margaret had long buried. The weight of possibility felt heavy. How would this disruption test the resolution they'd just begun to forge? Margaret's heart raced with the realization that everything was about to change. This could either shatter or solidify their moment of connection in ways she hadn't yet fathomed. Would they rise from the turmoil together, or would old wounds rip open yet again? The moment they had been waiting for felt both within reach and dangerously out of grasp. Margaret's grip tightened on her sketchbook as the door swung open, a gust of cool air carrying the scent of rain and a figure that made her pulse quicken. Jonathan, Emily's estranged brother, strode in, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the cafe's cozy warmth. In his presence, everything she had planned to say evaporated like mist. "Jonathan," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper, registering both surprise and a hint of regret. She cast a quick glance at Margaret, as though seeking reassurance amidst the turmoil of their brewing conversation. He approached, an air of defiance surrounding him. "We need to talk," he stated firmly, dismissing the table filled with unease. His piercing gaze landed on Margaret. "You can't turn your back on your family, Em." Desperation curled within Margaret's chest. This was not the interruption she had anticipated. Her thoughts raced. Would the conversation ever return to the heart of their shared pain? Here was disruption personified, a reminder that family dynamics were never as simple as art imitating life. "Not here," Emily replied, her words edged with apprehension, but a fire ignited in her eyes. Margaret could see the fight in her struggle to reclaim control, the burgeoning desire for clarity amidst familial chaos. Jonathan, however, pressed on, a relentless force. "We can't ignore what happened. You can pretend everything is fine, but it's not." Inside, Margaret wrangled with the rising tide of her emotions, frustration, anxiety, and a flicker of her long-buried resolve. Why was she allowing this interloper to dictate their moment? The years spent navigating her own fears taught her one imperative lesson. It was time to articulate her boundaries. "Emily and I are having an important conversation," Margaret interjected, her voice steadied by a sense of newfound determination. "Whatever history you share doesn't erase our struggles. If you're not here to support her, then maybe you should leave." Jonathan recoiled, shock morphing into fury. "What do you know about her pain? You, of all people?" he shot back, pointing an accusatory finger at her. Margaret felt the sting of his words, a flash of old memories igniting. Yes, she had failed to protect her son from the drama swirling around his sister. But she was not that fearful woman anymore. She had a different story to tell, one of resilience and depth. "Perhaps it's time for you to listen," she said, her heart racing. "Not everything is about blame. Sometimes it's about understanding where the hurt comes from and allowing the healing to begin." Emily looked at Margaret with something like pride mingled with disbelief, and for a fleeting moment the conflict hung in the air, thick with potential. Would Jonathan step back? Would he listen to the truth unfolding in front of him? This was Margaret's turning point, a defining moment where she could assert her voice, not just for herself, but for Emily as well. She could feel the tremors of clarity surging through her, pulling the bonds of the past and present together. Jonathan's expression changed, surprise softening into contemplation. "You think your art can fix this?" he questioned, disarmed but still holding his ground. "Maybe not fix, but it can illuminate, just like this conversation can," she replied, encouraged by a flicker of confidence unfurling within her. "We have to confront the chaos, not shy away from it." As they locked eyes, Margaret sensed the transformation rippling through her. This was what she had sought all along. To be seen, to be understood, not just as an artist, but as a mother determined to navigate the complexities of family dynamics. She glanced at Emily, who finally seemed to take a deep breath, emboldened by Margaret's outspokenness. Facing Jonathan together could produce clarity that overshadowed the hurt they had buried. But as Jonathan steeled himself, preparing to respond, Margaret felt a flicker of dread, quickly tempered by resolve. What would he reveal next? Would the truth they had tried to skirt around reveal deeper fractures instead of close them? The complex web of relationships lay before them, and the question hovered. Was this confrontation destined to deepen their rift, or could it serve as a bridge toward healing? The moment of truth loomed, echoing Margaret's thoughts as they prepared to navigate uncharted waters once again, together. The tension in the cafe snapped as Jonathan took a step closer, his fists clenched at his sides. There was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "So you're going to play the therapist now?" he barked. "What do you know about our pain? Do you even care?" Margaret felt her stomach knot. How had they arrived here, in this cramped space filled with coffee and judgment? Yet her newfound determination came brewing just beneath the surface. "I know enough to see that we've all been avoiding each other," she said, her voice unwavering despite the chaos. Emily shifted in her seat. "Jonathan, this isn't just about you," she tried to interject, but he shot her a look that silenced her. "Every time she tries to speak, it's like you both want to rewrite history," he snapped, redirecting his ire toward Emily. "You think drowning in your art will erase what happened?" "Avoiding the conversation hasn't worked for any of us," Margaret countered, drawing on the power of vulnerability she had discovered. "I'm not speaking to rewrite your history, Jonathan, but to help rewrite ours. We can't keep living in the shadows of our past." The cafe's atmosphere, once alive with background chatter, ceased as other patrons began to steal glances, sensing the brewing storm. Margaret carried the weight of that scrutiny, but instead of flinching, she embraced it, pushing herself further into her role as mediator. Jonathan scoffed, but there was something in his demeanor that suggested he was listening, perhaps for the first time. "And what's your role in all this?" he challenged, crossing his arms. "I'm here because I care about Emily," Margaret stated plainly, leaning forward as she spoke, the weight of her words pressing into the space between them. "But caring also means acknowledging our history for what it is, a part of us, not the whole. We can't change the past, but we can change how it defines our future." Jonathan's eyes narrowed, evaluating both her words and her resolve. Margaret seized the moment, mentally cataloging the lessons she had learned over the years, the essence of drawing boundaries, the importance of self-work, and the transformative power of honesty. Each principle was a brushstroke in her emerging portrait of resilience. "Maybe that's the problem," he eventually said, less aggressive, more introspective. "I've spent so long thinking it was all about revenge and retribution that I could never see any other perspective. You really believe we can heal?" "Yes," Margaret replied, the sincerity in her voice soothing the sharp edges of their confrontation. "Healing requires the courage to confront what hurts, not just the desire to escape it. Something shifted today, Jonathan. We're already beginning to break this cycle. Can't you see that?" Emotions shifted within Jonathan, revealed like layers of paint being carefully peeled back. Margaret wondered if he felt the tremors of the change too, or if this was merely a facade. But the longer they stood in this moment together, the more she believed that confrontation could indeed serve as a bridge, allowing all three of them to start anew. Emily's gaze darted between them. "What if we all just talked?" she said tentatively. "After all this time, we could start actually sharing how we feel, together." Jonathan hesitated, the flicker of hope battling against the weariness of long-held grudges. "And what if it breaks us even further?" he challenged, his voice low. "Or it might just set us free," replied Margaret, her heart racing at the faint spark of possibility igniting between them. But the doubt lingered in the air, thick with unspoken fears. Would Jonathan choose to remain in this cycle of pain, or could he embrace the path they had all begun to carve out together? Margaret knew she couldn't predict the outcome, but now, more than ever, she understood her power to influence the dialogue. The moment lay bare before them, full of potential yet fraught with peril. What would emerge from this emerging light? As Jonathan pondered, Margaret sensed another confrontation on the horizon, not just between them, but within herself. The breakthrough was close, yet the unknown loomed large. Would she be ready to face whatever waited just beyond this threshold? The cafe hummed with a fragile silence. Margaret's heart pounded as she locked eyes with Jonathan, the weight of their shared history thick in the air. He seemed caught in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, and in that moment she felt an unexpected kinship, both of them searching for resolution, both struggling to embrace vulnerability. "Talking might be the only path we have left," Margaret continued, her voice steady. "But it requires us to be honest, truly honest, with ourselves and each other." She dared to hope that the invitation for discussion could unravel the layers of resentment that had long woven their way into their relationships. Jonathan looked uncertain, but Margaret could see his resolve cracking just slightly. "And I guess that starts with me?" he said softly, glancing at Emily as though she were a lifeline. "Maybe it starts with all of us," Emily replied, her voice quaking but filled with determination. "I've felt lost for so long, Jonathan. I've tried to cover it up with anger, with distance." Margaret's gaze flickered between the two, sensing the shifting into place. This wasn't just about confronting Jonathan. It was about an awakening for both of them. "Jonathan, I've been there too," Margaret said, opening her heart in an unprecedented way. "We lose sight of ourselves living within our pain. I've spent years trying to matter, trying to justify my worth. But what keeps us tangled is the refusal to acknowledge our fears and wounds. Let this be your moment to step into the light." He searched her eyes, weighing her sincerity. "And what if I take that leap and fall back into the dark?" Margaret felt the urgency of this moment pulling at her spirit. "Then at least you'll know the truth of yourself. Pain is real, but so is growth. I'm learning to embrace that in my art, transforming chaos into creation. We all can." "Your art?" Jonathan repeated, his brows knitting together, still caught in skirmishes of skepticism. "Will that really fix things?" Margaret channeled the passion that had surged through her during the exhibition. "No, it won't. Art is just a canvas of my journey, a way to show others that we can navigate through pain and still strive for beauty. It's a path toward acceptance of who we are and the complexities of our relationships." Emily touched Jonathan's arm gently. "Maybe we should become a part of that journey. Maybe this is what we all need, an honest reckoning." Margaret saw the cracks of armor beginning to form around Jonathan's defenses. "And if we do choose to accept that journey together?" "It'll be messy," he stated, finally surrendering to the weight of their conversation. "And it won't be easy." "I wouldn't expect it to be," Margaret said, with a newfound assurance. "Real growth thrives in the messy, undefined spaces. It's where we transform our pain into something meaningful, even if it doesn't manifest how we imagined." That moment became a crucible for their exchange. The air shifted as Jonathan took a deep breath, the tension in his expression mutating into contemplation. "Then maybe we should begin," he murmured, hesitantly reaching out for Emily's hand. "But only if we all commit to being honest." Margaret nodded, her spirit alight with the promise of this collective commitment. "This is where the healing begins," she said firmly. "And then we can show the world that our chaos can bring forth beauty, whether through art or relationships." As they sat there, united in a newfound resolve, Margaret felt her heart swell and her confidence solidify. For the first time in a long while, the weight of her insecurities began to lift. The discussions that lay ahead would allow them to dig deeper than surface grievances, opening doors to understanding. Each facet of their lives intertwined, no longer separate stories, but a collective narrative of growth. Margaret realized that embracing her artistic journey meant embracing every part of herself, from the outpouring of creativity to the complexities of familial ties. With each passing moment, she felt a thread of concern untangling from her heart, unveiling a sense of freedom and achievement. A few weeks later, standing in her studio surrounded by her completed pieces for the exhibition titled "The Beauty Within the Chaos," Margaret felt the culmination of her transformation. The canvases radiated her journey, reflecting the vibrant yet tumultuous emotions she had traversed. In that moment of creative clarity, the deeper connections she had nurtured illuminated her new path. Emily and Jonathan had taken tentative steps toward reconciliation, actively participating in discussions about their family's past. Each revelation a brushstroke on the canvas of their evolving relationships. On the night of the opening, the gallery buzzed with excitement, the fruits of her labor displayed like a constellation of hope and resilience. As guests admired her work, Margaret stood tall, unwavering in her newfound identity. This wasn't just about validating her worth through art. It was about redefining her place within her family, casting light into the shadows of miscommunication and misunderstanding. "Margaret, your work is astonishing!" a stranger gushed, grabbing her attention and filling her with pride. From across the room, she caught Emily's gaze. There was no longer unease, only a glimmer of respect, the acknowledgement of a journey shared. The chaos had birthed beauty, and they were now committed to nurturing and celebrating that growth together. The night unfolded, weaving in and out of conversations filled with laughter, connection, and shared stories. In each interaction, Margaret felt her confidence solidify, mirrored in the smiles around her. As the exhibition drew to a close, she felt weightless, yet substantive. A woman emerged anew, grounded not just in her artistry, but in the powerful narrative of her relationships. Margaret knew her journey was far from over. It was just beginning. Transformation isn't just about creating art, she promised herself, stepping into the freighted space of her present. It's about evolution, acceptance, and the courage to hold on to hope, even amidst the chaos. With each passing moment, she watched as people resonated with her work, felt moved by her story, and held strong the connection she wished to share within herself and those around her. And as the final moments of the exhibit culminated in bright applause and admiration, Margaret knew she had arrived, confident, fulfilled, and forever transformed. This was her achievement, a recognition of worth that spanned beyond mere aesthetics, echoing her power to face everything with authenticity. Reborn within the realm of her own creation, she understood. Embracing vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but the ultimate act of strength. Margaret stood amidst the beauty she forged, a resolute artist ready to journey forward, emboldened, alive, and irrevocably powerful. Now is the time you must take action. If you want to witness more stories of personal transformation, subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional tales. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, showing your support for these journeys that inspire growth. Comment your reactions and theories about the story, join the conversation, and let's explore these themes together. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful conclusion. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting this channel through your actions.